Good morning and welcome to this press briefing by Mr. Alfred Zayas, who's the independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order. Mr. Zayas will start with an opening statement, some remarks before taking questions from journalists. Mr. Zayas.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to see some faces I recognize from last year. And this is now my third report to the General Assembly. As you know, the mandate was created September 2011, and I assumed my office in May 2012. The mandate has just been extended for 3 more years, which means I will remain as independent expert on the promotion of a democratic and equitable international order through the 30th of April 2018. As you know, it's a non-consensus mandate. It was approved in 2011 by 29 votes in favor, 14 against, 4 abstentions, and the extension was exactly the same. So I had hoped, to show the doubters that there is added value to this mandate. That is, the great convergence of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, that, I can make a coherent synthesis of all of it, and that there's no danger of so-called overlapping, duplication, although, I must say, I think that we can afford some duplication in the field of human rights. I mean, duplication is emphasis. And if you have a variety of players, a variety of rapporteurs who have different perspectives and different angles, I think we stand to benefit from it. And there is not a great deal of cost associated with it. As you know, we rapporteurs and independent experts work on an honorary basis, meaning we do not draw a salary. And costs involved are, of course, coming to New York and presenting a report. And, of course, the excellent support we get from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. One of the things I said yesterday to the Assembly is, please, please do not tell us that there is a financial crisis. What we have is a moral crisis. We have a crisis of priorities, because the states last year spent $1.75 trillion in the military. Now, reduce it by 10%, and there's going to be plenty of money to go around for the Sustainable Development Goals, for the post-2015 development agenda, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just putting the money where the money ought to be, and that is in the promotion and protection of human rights, and where best to put the money but the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Now, this year, I presented 2 reports. My report to the Human Rights Council focused on military expenditures and the negative impact that they have on the international order. We're all very happy that the Arms Trade Treaty is entering into force now on the 24th of December. Little Christmas gift. But it's not just regulating the arms trade that we're interested in. We're interested in reducing the arms trade. We're interested in converting those who are working in the arms industry and using those talented people elsewhere in the peacetime industries, in the social services. When we hear the word austerity, I get rather allergic when I hear austerity, because austerity is being used to cut education and health care, and is not being used in order to cut procurement of armaments or to scale down the military and military bases, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm really asking for a change of mindset. And to my delight, in Geneva on the 10th of September, when I presented my report, all 17 states that took the floor were at least ready to recognize the added value of the report. Nobody challenged any of my very concrete and pragmatic recommendations. 12 NGOs that took the floor after the governments all supported the mandate and endorsed the recommendations. Here in New York, my report focused on a totally different subject. My report focuses on the right of all peoples to self-determination. And I'm asking governments to regard self-determination not as a cause of trouble. I'm asking them to regard self-determination, or rather the realization of self-determination by unrepresented peoples, by non-self-governing peoples, by peoples living under occupation, by minorities, as a conflict prevention strategy. If you look at self-determination not only as an abstract right, but as something that is so essential to individuals, something that is so essential to your identity. Human rights are there in order that you can be you. As I said, I'd like to do away with the first, second, third generation rights paradigm. I've been, in some of my articles, I have developed a functional paradigm of human rights in which I divided them into enabling rights, the right to food, the right to water, the right to shelter, the right to homeland. Then procedural rights, the rights you need in order to achieve other rights, the right to freedom of expression, access to information, all due process rights. Then what you might call inherent or imminent rights, the rights that go right across the board, the right to equality, the right to non-discrimination, the right to non-arbitrariness. And then all of this edifice, all of these rights, what do they serve? The outcome right. The outcome right is the right to identity, is the right to be you, is the right to be left in peace, the right to be able to live out your culture, your language, your preferences. That is the outcome right, for which you need all of the other rights. And that way you're not prejudicing, as we do in our current paradigm, when we say, oh, second generation rights, they're not that important. And third generation rights, right to environment, et cetera. So I am trying to make some plausible arguments to bring people around and have them recognize what you need for the pursuit of happiness. And for the pursuit of happiness, you do need a conducive environment. And you have to stop the kind of fear-mongering that we live in. And I think also a change in our approach to society, our approach to our neighbors, to our approach to others, that we should not perceive as potential enemies. I think we should perceive our neighbor also as a potential partner, as a potential friend, that we can probably cooperate with them. But going back to my report, the report has many very concrete recommendations. And what I would call the added value of the report on self-determination are the criteria. I formulate a number of criteria that, if applied uniformly and not a la carte, I think will result in the achievement of a world that is more peaceful, more democratic, more equitable, and that, of course, flows perfectly into my mandate. My mandate, if you have ever read Resolution 18/6 of the Human Rights Council, is a very, very vast mandate. It's a huge menu that, of course, has disarmament in it, and it has the right to peace in it, and it has self-determination in it, and, of course, gender balance. All of these things are extremely important, and my function is to make this coherent synthesis of it all. It's a good challenge. I think that I've made a good try at it with my prior 6 reports, and I look forward to cooperating with states, with national human rights institutions, with civil society in the formulation of the further reports. Now, the right to peace is one of the main pillars of Resolution 18/6, and the Human Rights Council is currently seized with a draft resolution on, or rather draft declaration on the human right to peace. They're going to have now a 3rd session of the Intergovernmental Open-Ended Working Group on the right to peace. I participated in the first 2, and I will be participating in the 3rd. And of course, what we want to say is peace is a precondition if you want to enjoy civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. And in order to achieve this situation of peace, we have to do away not only with war, we also have to do away with all structural violence that pervades society today. Now, talking about peace, I want to bring this book to your attention. You probably know it. And back in 1932, the League of Nations asked Albert Einstein, which is the question of questions, and why don't you formulate a question and address that question to someone who can tackle that question. So Albert Einstein formulates the question, why war? And he actually analyzes it in all sorts of its components and the various problems that trigger war. And he sends that to Sigmund Freud and say, Sigmund, give me an answer on this. And Sigmund takes him on. And I must say it's breathtaking. I wish that this were taught in every high school, and it was taught in colleges, and that every delegate and every ambassador would read it, because it will show you some very fundamental problems that still plague society today. Now, I wanted also to use this opportunity to raise 2 other issues of importance. The necessity, the urgent necessity to reform the United Nations in order to make it more effective. The book by Joseph E. Schwarzberg, Transforming the United Nations System, Designs for a Workable World, and this is the United Nations University that published this book. This has really a mode d'emploi, how to reform the United Nations, including the Security Council and including the gradual expansion of the membership in the Security Council and the modification and gradual withdrawal from the use of the veto. Another possibility, of course, in order to have more representation, to have a global parliament, a so-called World Parliamentary Assembly. I would like to see that advance, and this is something that could function parallelly with the General Assembly having a consultative status, not a legislative body, but a consultative body. I also work closely with the Interparliamentary Union in Geneva. I had the opportunity of giving a keynote address 2 weeks ago, Monday, and I very much believe in the role of parliaments in fomenting democracy and in fomenting peace in the world. Another thing that I would like to invite you to ask questions on is on the issue of the rights of indigenous. I work very closely, and I used to work closely with the rapporteur on indigenous, James Anaya. Now we have a new rapporteur, Vicky Tauli-Corpus. And she is a wonderful lady, and I hope to be able to put out something together with her, maybe do a joint mission with Vicky. One of the points that I wanted to make, self-determination is not an issue of the past. Self-determination is very much an issue of today, and it affects not only the Ukraine of Crimea or Kosovo or what have you, it also affects millions of indigenous peoples in Australia, in New Zealand, in Rapa Nui, in Chile, in the United States, in Canada, etc. There have been apologies by Barack Obama to the American indigenous, by Prime Minister Chrétien to the Canadian indigenous, by Kevin Rudd to the Australian Aborigines. But apologies are important because there's recognition of the injustice done. But you have to go beyond apologies. You have to have a system that will allow the indigenous to be themselves, to exercise their right to their identity, to be who they are, and to enjoy their culture, to enjoy their natural resources. I could go on, but I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. de Zayas. We will take some questions. Pamela, please, and then Matthew.
Yes. Good morning, Dr. de Zayas. We've heard a lot from you on all these reports, and so thank you on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association. We've met. I'm Pamela Falk from CBS News. My question goes back to both what you've said here. I have some big picture questions about Freud and Einstein, but about the indigenous issues you've brought up and that you mentioned today. The Arctic negotiations, you mentioned that a few years ago, and there's been no progress, it seems, in having the Inuits and all of the other indigenous communities in Canada and other countries be involved at all in what seems to be heating up in the whole Arctic negotiations, law of the sea and who owns it. Can you talk to that point? Have you addressed that point? I haven't seen this report.
Unfortunately, I have not gotten around to addressing that particular issue. I will confess to you that I have endeavored to be cautious in my reports. I don't engage in naming and shaming. And I did want to see my mandate renewed, and it was renewed. In the second half of my term, I may be a bit more forward in addressing issues of this nature, which are still very contentious. Needless to say, the Inuits and all the populations of the Arctics have this Article 1, Covenant Civil and Political Rights, this right to self-determination and right to sovereignty over natural resources. Now, I'm not saying that a central government cannot establish certain goals, financial goals and goals for the extractive industry. But that has to be done, as the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People says, with the free, prior, and informed consent of the indigenous. What I see happen very often is that governments say, oh, well, the declaration is not a treaty, it's not legally binding, it's soft law, so we don't have to observe it. Now, I think that governments would do well, actually, to surpass that threshold, to say, we have an interest, we believe in human rights, and we're going to prove that we believe in human rights because we are going to implement soft law. We're not going to cop out. We're not going to say, sorry, I mean, we never ratified ILO Convention 169, so we're not bound by it. Sorry, there is an international consensus. There is a human rights momentum and a commitment to human rights that all governments make. And if they are committed to human rights, they should not be looking out for loopholes. Why do they look out for loopholes? Money, obviously. I mean, because there's a lot of money to be made, and in indigenous areas like in the state of Alaska, for instance. I was just in Anchorage, and I had the opportunity of talking with some 50 chiefs at the annual conference in Anchorage. Well, it's quite clear that government wants the riches of not only Alaska, all the other areas where indigenous live, but somehow they don't want to share. Somehow they don't share at the level that we would call equitable. I mean, if the indigenous let you into their lands and let you share in these riches, I think that we owe it to the indigenous to have a fair deal. And I think much has to be done in the field to reach even the beginnings of a fair deal. And what also has to be done is correct the continuing violations. It's not just that these are things that happened in the past and now we have tabula rasa and we've forgotten that so and so many indigenous were killed in the course of Manifest Destiny. The fact is that there are continuing effects and continuing violations of the rights of the indigenous, and those must be addressed. But for that, in order to address them, you need an advocate to formulate what has to be addressed. And you also need genuine representatives of the indigenous and not puppet representatives. I mean, it's been a practice since time immemorial that when you want to deal with a group of people, you try to deal with someone who is going to play the game and not with the actual authority, with those who have the legitimacy to negotiate with you. So I want to really underline the importance of Article 19 of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples on the free, prior, informed consent. And I want to remind the Article 28 on the issue of the right of indigenous to set priorities of what's being done with their land and with their resources. And Article 32 that says that for damage done to their lands and to their environment, there should be compensation. I mean, it's not just that this happened so long ago, so it's over, you know, turn the page, forget what has been done against them. No, I think if we are moral people, I mean, it is our moral, ethical obligation to address historical inequities, and the Human Rights Committee did so in a number of indigenous cases, including the Lubicon Lake ban, where in paragraph 32.1 of the views of the committee, they addressed the issue of historical inequities, which, as long as they continue, and they do continue, constitute a violation of Article 27 of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
We have time for one or two questions before we leave, because we have to give back to Matthew. Please.
Sure, thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for this briefing. I'm looking at your current report, and it mentions self-determination like 122 times. So I thought I would ask you, I wanted to, in covering the fourth committee here, there actually are disputes about for example, you know, the Malvinas or Falkland Islands. The UK says this is a self-determination issue, and Argentina says this is territorial integrity. Same thing between Spain and the UK on Gibraltar. And I also wanted, as the last one, I wanted to ask you about Western Sahara, where you have this question of, does this constitute the last case of outright colonialism in Africa, or is it a matter of Morocco's own kind of self-determination? So how does your mandate address these kind of hot-button issues in the UN, and how does it fit into your view of self-determination?
Well, I developed a number of criteria that, if applied, not only in the case of Malvinas and Gibraltar and Western Sahara, but if applied to the Ukraine and to Crimea and to Abkhazia and to Kurdistan and to many other areas, and applied to the indigenous, I think would enable a compromise solution. Obviously, neither territorial integrity nor self-determination is an absolute immutable law. I mean, you have to balance rights and interests within the context of the UN Charter, within the context of the covenants on civil and political rights and covenants on economic, social, and cultural rights. Now, obviously, there is a situation, a fait accompli, if you want, in the case of the Falkland Malvinas, in which there was initially an Argentinian population, then came a British population, then came an attempt by Argentina to take it back, and then obviously the population that lives there is British. And obviously they want to stay together with Great Britain. There must be a halfway house. There must be a way of recognizing the rights of human beings who actually live there and who should not be transferred. They should not be expelled. They have their rights. On the other hand, whether you get a condominium situation in which both Argentina and Great Britain play a role in the running of the Falklands, there are any number of options open. What we don't want is the use of force. What we don't want is an armed conflict. So self-determination, if you address the various options, can allow both states to reach a form of compromise that will be consistent with the obligations of Articles 1 and 2 of the UN Charter, and will be also consistent with the covenants. The same thing goes for Gibraltar. The same thing goes for Western Sahara, where we have the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, and where there has been little progress. Now, I would like to see the parties actually sit down together and say, well, let's have a quid pro quo. Let's try to accommodate the interests of all stakeholders. That can be done if you have good faith, goodwill, and I can only encourage states, to look at it from the point of view of long term. It's in everybody's interest to have a solution that is a peaceful solution and that enables all parties to reach a degree of fulfillment. As I said, the outcome that I want to see in human rights is the right to be yourself and the right to have this opportunity to enjoy human rights without being oppressed by some authority. And what I said also yesterday to the General Assembly in my statement, no doctrine, whether self-determination or territorial integrity, no doctrine can derogate from the right to life, and no doctrine can justify massacres. So it is a matter for the United Nations, it's a matter for the international community to enable a sensible discussion among parties who have a dispute and to reach a peaceful settlement pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 3 of the UN Charter.
We have exactly 1 minute for one question and one answer, please.
Thank you. My name is Abdel Hamid Sayam from the Arabic Daily that is based in London, Al-Quds Al-Arabi. And my question, sir, if I want your thoughts on the indigenous people of Palestine, and if the criteria you just spoke about, that they have the right to be compensated, their land had been used, they've been thrown out of their homes, if that criteria applies to the Palestinian people and their right to self-determination as well. Thank you.
Yeah, the criteria certainly apply in the context of the occupation of the West Bank and of and the situation also in Gaza. Happily, we have a new rapporteur on the rights of the population in the occupied territories. I would like to see, as part of a self-determination package, I would like to see the implementation of the very concrete recommendations made by the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion of the 9th of July 2004. And also I would like to see more attention being given to the recommendations of Richard Falk and the recommendations of the new rapporteur on Palestine. Myself, although it falls also within my mandate, since my mandate in a way encompasses all of them, I do not like to encroach on the turf of the rapporteur on Palestine, and I must say I wish him luck, because of all mandates, that is probably the most difficult one.
Thank you, Mr. Zayas. Thank you all for coming. Next is the noon briefing with the spokesperson for the Secretary General. Thank you so much.
Thank you.